Good morning. Just making sure you're all awake. Well, thanks for having me here today. I kind of grew up running around the halls of these annual meetings with my mother and father. My father, as you heard, is a pediatrician. My mom, Judy, and my dad, Joe, have been pretty active in this organization at OCMA and CMA for many years. So it's kind of fun to be back after having not been around the organization in a while and see that it's alive and active, and there's many generations in this room, which is good because that means that the organization is growing and continuing. So today, I'll probably be doing the least amount of talking. That's what I hope is the case in our discussion today, that we have a lively discussion, an interactive discussion with our panel, so that you can hear from them on the various disciplines that they are in. And we're so glad to have everyone here today to talk about, as you all saw in the video, something that I think the greatest term that really sums up what it is Farmageddon. I thought that was great, and I thought that the genius behind coming up with one word to describe the problem that you've been hearing about, studying and learning about this weekend is really good. And we'll talk more about that tomorrow when we talk about communications and messaging, running political campaigns and developing a strategy to do something about everything you've heard here this weekend. So just to review with everyone who we have Sherrie Rubin, the founder and director of HOPE, Heroin, Oxycontin, Prescription Drugs Education, and which, as you've seen here today in her presentations and videos, and with having Aaron here today, the program called Rolling with Rubin. It's a very vibrant education program that is robust and helping educate folks all across the state and hopefully the country. Sherrie, and if we need to help you with that, anyone should need to sign up and get on board and support you, because what you're presenting to people is very powerful. We also have Susan Beagle, who is a registered nurse with Ocean View Unified School District in Huntington Beach. We have Mark Nomedy, who is a special agent with the United States Drug Enforcement Administration. We also have, whom you heard from earlier, Dr. Roneet, who's an emergency room physician and director of operations for Scripps Mercy in San Diego. Dr. Lev was president of the American College of Emergency Physicians in 2000 and chairs the Emergency Medicine Oversight Committee for the San Diego County Medical Society. We also have Della Lacey Kerr, who is a prevention specialist and member of the Alcohol and Drug Education Prevention Team with the County of Orange Healthcare Agency. I've got some questions for all of you here, and I'm going to ask you questions that would be great to hear from all of you on. And I have some specific questions that I think will help invoke some very useful discussion that I'll ask each of you to lead off with your answer and ask other members of the panel to respond. As we watched the video this weekend that was put together on this topic, and we've heard firsthand experiences, and we've had a lot of discussion and review about what's going on with prescription drugs. What caused each of you to get involved and really become passionate about this issue, and you take time away from your regular lives and weekends? It'd be great for you to share with each person, with the crowd, what each of you believes is so important and what really led you to be involved and become passionate about this issue. And we're always going to start with the parent. And so, Sherrie, we've heard from you today, but please share with us again why this is so important beyond Aaron.
Well, I think to educate the community is one of the reasons we started advocating to talk about prescription drugs. But most importantly, no family should have to bury their child needlessly. And no child should have to have the challenges that Aaron has because of prescription drugs. And out of that tragic but blessed situation, I decided that it was important to share this message. And we started sharing this message back in 2007. And it was really not received very well. from schools or families. At that point, it was still a topic no one really wanted to accept or talk about. And so I really thought that it was a very important topic, and it was taking young adults' lives and their futures and destroying or altering them. So that is why we come.
Well, as we leave the home and we move from a parent to a school nurse, Susan, tell us about your experience as a nurse and what has made you passionate about this.
Okay, what's made me passionate is twofold. First of all, as a school nurse, I see many more children coming into the health office with signs of anxiety and depression at a very young age, and really at an alarmingly increasing rate. So there's the need to get out and offer more mental health resources. And I see kids coming in and I work with kindergarten through 8th grade, so we're getting them young. And I'm seeing more young kids coming in with signs of being in an altered state of mind, perhaps abusing cough medication, overtaking their Ritalin, their Adderall. I'm seeing those type of signs. And then as a parent, on the other end, I've had 3 kids go through Huntington Beach High School, which sadly enough earned the nickname of Heroin High School. So there's been a lot of way too many drug overdoses through that community. And so I wanted to get the message across through my profession at an early age to help parents get out of their bubble, to become more aware of the dangers of abusing prescription medication, that it does lead to bigger, more dangerous drugs. And as they get older and out into the community and out from under such a tight, sheltered environment, they're going to be exposed to so many avenues of getting hold of more and more dangerous substances. And so I have become passionate about educating parents with young children.
Thank you, Susan. And Mark, who is with the Department or the Drug Enforcement Agency. Mark, we're so glad to have you here today, and I look forward to hearing about your passion on this issue.
Thank you. Well, I've done this for 25 years or so, and I would say, well, in the last 5 years, I've concentrated solely on prescription drug investigations. And I have seen more deaths in the last couple years than I did in the entire first portion of my career. There's probably in Orange County 1 death a week of a young adult, and they're all from good families, and they're just kids that got caught up in this prescription drug problem and didn't realize what they were getting into. So last Christmas, for example, the week before Christmas, right before I was going on vacation, I had 2 cell phones on my desk that I had to go through and get the information off of them for kids that had died the week before Christmas. And one was 23 and one was 24. So just the devastation, not just the deaths of these poor young kids, but the collateral damage and the devastation in the wake of damage that it leaves is just incredible. So that would be my reason.
Well, thank you, Mark, and Dr. Lev. You are in a very unique environment in terms of one of the stages in which, unfortunately, some of our youngsters and adults end up in if they face they end up having a drug overdose. You're in the emergency room. You receive patients. Is that what made you passionate about this, and what else made you passionate about doing something about this topic?
So I kind of mentioned in my talk that I've watched throughout my career that the number of patients who come to ER who are on chronic meds and need more and more prescriptions have just increased from year to year, and it's a great dissatisfier in practicing medicine, not just for me, but for all physicians. And we always thought that we're in a silo. And yet, well, how do you tell someone that they're not in pain, but yet you're writing still a prescription? I was really inspired by the rest of the community to see that there's a whole bunch of people out there who are advocates, who are dealing with this, and realize that we need to get together as a medical community and do our piece of the pie in curbing the epidemic. And by doing that, it makes our medical practice better. And you can feel better about what you're doing in your career as well.
Thank you, and Della, who's with our healthcare agency and is a prevention specialist. Della, showed us what's really made you passionate about this, being on the policy end of things and the prevention end of things.
Well, my background is a medical family. I'm from Rochester, Minnesota, home of the Mayo Clinic. And so I grew up with the joy, the art of medicine, and the joy that every new medication brings, the quality of life that a new medication provides. And then I went to work and found out that 2 toddlers had been injected with ketamine, which is a horse tranquilizer, on the seemingly useful person that called himself a physician. And so what we found was that there were huge numbers of people in some of our indigent populations here in Orange County and undocumented populations that were being victimized by these people that said they were medical professionals and said that they had legitimate medications. And we developed a task force and went after these folks. And it hurt me that these people were taking such a valuable art, the art of medicine, away from legitimate physicians, legitimate pharmaceutical companies that want to help save lives. And these people are doing this horrific stuff. Well, then I found out, sadly, that these 2 toddlers didn't make it, and went into my office one day and found out that 11 youth from Dana Hills High School died from prescription drugs. And that's what drove me to where we are today. When I found out the heinous things that these 2 people who called themselves doctors did to those 2 toddlers, that was horrific. But then when I found out that 11 teenagers from one high school here in Orange County were so blissfully unaware of the effects that these fabulous medications can devastate their lives with, I thought there needs to be more balance and there needs to be education. And these medications, are we allowed to say just about anything?
The camera's rolling.
Okay, well, that there needs to be education. Everybody needs to know that just because these are available and just because you can buy cough medicine, dextromethorphan, over the counter doesn't mean that it's safe. And obviously that has passed some folks by. Furthermore, the non-medical use of prescription drugs to party on became a really significant part of my job and my life because, as I said, it proceeded from the art and the beauty behind medicine and pharmaceuticals.
Well, before we started this discussion, I had the chance to talk with each person that is up here on the panel today and connect with them, and we started forming a group out in the hallway during break. And one of the things that I realized that was really exciting to me, and I think it should be encouraging for all of you, is they pretty much all knew each other. And we go back to, I'll give the example, one of the things that people said was one of our federal government's failures in September 11, 2001 was agencies weren't talking to each other. Well, we have a big problem here, and you have people from different disciplines and in different environments where our victims, our teens and adults who are misusing prescription drugs are exposed. They're in the home with the parent. They're with the school nurse at the school. They're encountering law enforcement if they break the law or they get caught. they end up in Dr. Love's emergency room if they overdose, or are seeking prescriptions that they don't need. And then we get down to the end of the table, and Della has to go out into the community and help change the social norms, as she told me, as part of her scope of work for the county, and engage parents in discussion. So to that end, the exciting thing is they all knew each other, and they're working together. So that's very encouraging. What are we not doing? This is a question for all of you. What are we not currently doing we need to do a better job of in each of our areas, environments, and disciplines? And we'll get into a little bit of a policy discussion in terms of what we need to be advocating for, but I want to just hear from you. Brass tacks, what do we need to do more of in each of your environments?
I think in the home environment and as a family, we have to embrace the concept that this can happen to you, to us, and that it's not just the person next door. These young adults or children are approached at school at a very young age, as the school nurse said, which is a trend that's increasing. And when they're at school, they're not approached once or twice, it's 3 times or more. And in every environment of their school life, not just in the classrooms, but where they're doing sports, where they're doing music, in every part of their life. And so the first step is for parents to understand that this can happen to their child. The second step for that parent and that family is to learn how to safeguard their family and do the best that they can and educate themselves about prescription drugs.
Thank you. Susan?
One of the limitations we have as school nurses is that we are spread so thin. With my school district, I'm at a school a day a week. So my caseload is anywhere from about 2,500 to 2,700. What is very important is to make parents aware of their child's behavior when they come into the health office and there's behavior changes in them. They are lethargic, they're very anxious today, they're combative, this is not the normal. And I do all I can to try to call the parent, get a hold of them, call them at work, let them know this happened to your child today. But the drawback is being spread so thin and at a school one day a week, I'm not catching it all. And those are the limitations, because the more that we can encourage parents to be involved with their children, okay, well, this is what happened to you today. What did something upset you? Did you take that cough medicine that I told you not to take in the morning? If they've been taking any over-the-counter prescriptions, just that ability to encourage parents to talk to their kids, to not be afraid, to lay down the law, and to be involved. So that's what, as a school nurse, I could be doing, we could be doing more, is we could have more time to counsel parents. And, more time to be at one school to identify symptoms of kids that are acting to be in an altered state.
Thank you, Susan. Mark, the Drug Enforcement Agency, may be involved in going into doctors' offices or hospitals to address criminal issues with professionals who are handing out these drugs. But what could we be doing more of? Are there things that our other environments and our other disciplines here can do to support the DEA in that effort? And who else is involved in law enforcement that is going to help us in the school and in the home and even in other agencies like at the local level?
Well, I think everybody has kind of touched on similar issues. one of the big problems is the perception that prescription drugs aren't dangerous. And so you have to educate the kids about the dangers of prescription drugs, that oxy is no different than heroin. They don't have that. You can't imagine how many kids overdose the first time they tried it. Parents are the same thing. The parents don't understand prescription drugs are every bit as dangerous as illegal drugs. And I'm sure you've seen the statistics that more kids are dying of prescription drug overdoses than all of the illegal drugs combined. So parents don't understand that. So you have to educate the parents. And we do presentations at high schools, and you'd be surprised, 15 or 20 parents show up. That's it. So it's hard to get them involved because they don't understand there's a problem. And even if their kids have a problem, they may not know it, because once they start an opiate addiction, at some point they have a tolerance, and they're not doing it to get high anymore. They're doing it to not get sick. So they may say, oh, my kid had a drug problem, but they're fine now. Well, they're not fine. They're just doing maintenance. So as far as law enforcement is the same way. Even within DEA, there's that perception that cocaine and meth and heroin, those are the glamorous drugs, but the pill cases, that's just white collar. So even in the law enforcement community, I think there's the perception that these aren't real drug cases, when the reality is more kids are dying of prescription drugs than anything else. I think the medical community, and I know all of you have a vested interest, but I don't think the medical community understands the dangers of opiates too. When I do my presentation, I put up a slide, and it's a prescription that my wife got just recently, 2 months ago, and she went to a dentist and got a deep teeth cleaning and walked out with 20 Vicodins, so for a teeth cleaning. So I think there's that kind of perception now that Vicodin is the new Tylenol. And I tell people that I was 45 years old before I ever received a Vicodin. When I was in college, I sliced off a finger and they reattached it, and I got Tylenol 3 for it. And it's just like, you suck it up. But now the perception is nobody wants to feel any pain, so we're going to just prescribe you whatever you need so you don't feel any pain. So I think the medical community needs to be a little more aware of the consequences of overprescribing. That's it. The politicians, of course, they need to be a little more receptive to the laws that we need to get through as far as what's going to make the problem better. Cures, we struggle and struggle and struggle to get it funded, and that's just a huge resource. I think the pharmaceutical companies bear down quite a bit on any type of pressure to regulate. And so, in summary, that would be pretty much everything from my point.
Well, Dr. Lev, now you know why you're sitting next to Mark, because you get to respond and help us figure out how
I'm just
we...
going to concentrate on the medical part, and I will actually agree with him. I think that we've had a push in our profession to satisfy patients and give them drugs, and that dentist thinks he's doing a good job by giving those 20. What a great service. You don't even have to ask for it. But I think we need to completely change our medical culture and prescribe smarter, and using cures makes me smarter, and not every little thing needs pain meds. And it used to be that patients expected. I'd get a cut on the finger, and it's like, okay, well, where's my pain prescription with that? And when I was younger in my career, it would be, okay, right here, And now I'm like, really, take a Tylenol, So a lot of the computerized programs we have, I know like with the Kaiser system, if you come in and you need Vicodin, put 30 tablets. It's just the way it goes. And we need to go back and educate. You don't need so much. And what happens when you give so much, they get diverted. I had a lady who came in with an overdose on Percocet, and that has Tylenol and kills your liver. She ended up in the ICU. I asked her, where did these prescriptions go? This 50-year-old woman. And it came from her husband. He goes, yeah, I got these back in November. I had back surgery. My surgeon gave me 100 pills. It was a big surgery. I took one pill, and it was way too much for me, so they sat on the shelf. So we just need to prescribe less and have people use cures more. it's like I've said before, it's cumbersome, but once you use it, you just be a better doctor.
Ditto. Actually, I've got a couple of other things as well. But seriously, I agree with every option that these folks have mentioned. There's so much that needs to be done. So I'm not going to go into cures or anything like that. But what we find here in Orange County specifically is an issue with, as I mentioned to Jeff, social norm. And it's my job to go out and convince everyone in this room that the onus to stop this is on our shoulders. I have to look at the way I am taking medications. I have to look at how available in my home those medications are. I have to look at the fact that, well, when I go to the dentist, they'll never prescribe me anything. I get just rinse with salt water. But frankly, I think we need to kind of go back to that. When Jaco suggested that pain was the 5th vital sign, we did ourselves a really big injustice, because now, as everyone else has mentioned, pain is thought of as something we are not supposed to ever feel. I'm never supposed to feel anything. And so what we see at the health department in our data is that we have these youth who have, and one of the former presidents of the Orange County Medical Association was commenting on this last night, that Standiford Helm said he is seeing opioid induced hyperalgia, where people are just taking these pain medications and they don't know if they've finished healing. They don't know that that bone is set and so there's no pain anymore because they've had 30 Vicodin for it, you know. So these are all things that aren't being done, and basically it's a matter of education. It's a matter of us getting out there. Like Mark said, we do these kinds of presentations to parents all the time, and we've all decided that we're going to stop referring to them as prescription drug seminars, but rather call them opportunities to keep your kids healthy and safe and looking to a brighter future, or something a little more upbeat, because we're not getting them. They're not coming out. And if they don't come out, we will never end the stigma of addiction. And that goes back to Susan at the kindergarten, 2nd, 3rd grade level. We had an incident here in Orange County where a parent who, again, is not recognizing his own social behavior, has a legitimate medical marijuana card that for a situation that he has. But he was buying edibles, and he left an edible marijuana brownie on the counter at home. One of the 8-year-olds realized what it was, took it in his backpack, and of course he came onto campus with it because it looked like a brownie, right? And he passed it out to all his little buddies, and we had 8 little 8-year-olds at Hoag Hospital. So we have to take responsibility. It's my responsibility. So monitor your medications, secure your medications, and destroy your medications. If you need help getting that established in your communities, please take my card. It's out there, and I'll help you do that.
Well, Adela had some really, really good recommendations that she'd be happy to share with you after. Maybe we'll talk about some of them here too, in terms of what products to buy to secure your medication. The ones that you think would be great really are, and the ones that are maybe weren't great are good, and things like that. So I look forward to that discussion. Coming back to Sherrie as a parent, what, as a father, do I need to start preparing for in terms of telling my 3-year-old daughter and my 3-month-old son, as they grow up very quickly, to the point that I'm educating them and helping them to make the right choices, but not pushing them to rebel? I'm sure that's the challenge that every parent faces, right?
Right. I don't know if there's a great response for the non-rebellion because I think we all kind of do it in our own way if we teenagers, whatever that will be. But I think the first thing you have to accept that being a good dad does not mean you have to be your child's friend. Your child really doesn't need any more friends. They need a dad. And they need people to set good examples. And they need a firm and guide and loving way. And when you have your children, do you have toxic chemicals under your sink?
Of course not.
And if you do, they're locked.
Remove them.
And if you, and they're locked, right? If
Oh,
you did
okay.
have.
I was a fanatic about it.
Yeah.
I changed the locks on all the doors and windows. I mean, I went
Exactly.
nuts. Catherine was
So-
on her way into this world.
So your toxic, your chemicals for your cleaning of your house, you removed, so your children were not in danger. Or if they were uneducated because they were children, they wouldn't drink them. The same has to go with prescription meds. Exactly the same. They can be toxic, they are dangerous, and if your child is not educated, no matter how old, they will ingest enough that will be harmful.
Della, did you have a comment?
But because I was applauding what you said. You caught me off guard. I was waiting for the other part. Well, I was kind of smiling because we do these presentations on a pretty regular basis. And occasionally, Mark Nomadi's children will come. He's got 3 lovely 20-something daughters. And occasionally, he'll get up there on stage and he'll say, anyone who has had me drug test them, raise your hand. And you see this pretty young arm go up. And it's true. Sherrie said it beautifully when we're talking about little tiny children. But what we end up getting is 15, 16-year-old, the parents of 15 and 16-year-olds who are saying, well, I can't look at her phone and see what texts. She said she'll call the police and say I'm abusing her. That's all part of this education. We are not going to come out, Child Protective Services is not going to come out if we see that you have healthy, happy children. And if you guys can go out into your communities and say those same things, that would help tremendously. Another part that I was chuckling about is teaching from the young age to call 911. We just recently got a Good Samaritan Act passed here in Orange County, in large part because of a gentleman who you saw in the film, Vernon Porter, and his daughter Vanessa. The young man at whose house she was partying didn't call 911 because he had illicit drugs around. Well, this new 911 legislation allows for a person to just call. Just call. If that person's in trauma, call. We'll worry about the rest of it later. Now, my friends in law enforcement would have an issue with working it out later, but if it saves a life, it'll save a life. And we need to start telling our kids this at very young ages. Also, again, we have resources. The California Poison Control has an age graph on when you should be talking about what at what age. And like Sherrie said, locking up your household cleaners and your medications at the age of 3, teaching little ones that if they see a pill that's fallen on the ground, that they don't touch it, they don't eat it, they call somebody over. Starts reinforcing how valuable medications are and how dangerous they can be. Both sides of the spectrum are taught by starting them at the age of 3. And that's why I was going to.
No, that's great. Mark, tell us about free drug testing. Is that something that we can do in our schools? Does the DEA help with that? I imagine if you announce a drug test, at a school that absences the next day will be very high, right? So, but in all seriousness, is that something that we should be doing? Can we do it? Are there resources for parents who want to drug test their kids and think, oh, where do I even get a drug test? How do I do that?
Yeah, 100% it's out there. And now I'm speaking more as a parent than as a DEA agent. I always had the drug test there for my kids. I never threatened it. I would say, and to be honest, the reason is it gives them an out. Because I would say, and there were nights where they were going to a party and I would set it out on the counter and I would say, if you come home and I have any suspicions whatsoever, I'm going to drug test you. So that was their out. When they went to a party, they could say, look, I can't do this, I can't do that because my parents drug test me. I also had a breathalyzer for the same reason. If I suspected, I would make them blow, and especially if they were driving, it would be a big issue in our house.
What about the GPS?
Yeah, and well, whatever. You know, I have a lot of resources that y'all don't have. But you know, the fact of the matter is, your kids don't really have any privacy. If they're living under your house and they're under 18, you know, you need to do everything you can. This is such a problem with opiates that it's a life and death thing. If they get involved with opiates, that's it. You could lose your kid. You can't imagine the horrible stories. Well, you've heard some of the horrible stories of things that happen, and they happen right under your nose. So, you know, you have to do everything you can. And again, that's me as a parent. The only thing I need to caution you about the drug tests are they come in very, very many varieties and flavors. I've had parents come to me and say, I drug test my kid, he's test clean, and but I know he's high. Well, does your drug test for Opana? No, it doesn't. So there's like 6 panel tests all the way up to, I don't know what they have now, 16, 15. So it depends on the test. So, you know, you might not be testing for Xanax, and maybe they're using Xanax. So you just have to know that what you're getting is what you want. That's it. Yes, ma'am.
I just have to ask you, and I'm a parent of 3 daughters, they turned out real well. I never threatened them with the drug test. We live in a different part of the country, although Tennessee is very high in terms of prescription drug use and methamphetamines.
My daughter goes to school in Kentucky.
Well, we'll talk.
She invited
Did
us.
GPS.
Did you really do this with your girls as a way of kind of getting them an out?
100%.
I mean, was that, did
I
they
never-
understand that that's really what you were doing more than threatening them with the drug test?
Well, a little both, but I never once used it. They never ever had to take the drug test. I still have it in my cabinet. That was always there.
Yeah.
The breathalyzer, however, we use more than once.
Well, you know, sticking with Della and with Mark, and what we'll do is we'll open up for questions here in just a few minutes. But a couple more questions for us in our discussion, and starting back with Della and with Mark, you know, what policies at the federal, state, and local level do we not have in place that you think would be helpful? And what resistance are we being met with current proposals that might be on the table to enhance our ability to address this problem and prevent it? Mark, Della, whoever wants to jump in first. You're in the hot seat.
I'll be honest, I'm not sure I can really speak to policy. You know, unfortunately, I'm more at the execution end of it than the policy end of it. So, you know, I can't really say, other than the things people have already mentioned about cures and making our job a little easier. I mean, I do have ideas about things that would make life easier, but I'm probably not the best person to speak to that.
That was well said.
Sorry.
Again, ditto.
Well, and I welcome comments from the rest of the panel. I started with Della and Mark because they are on the execution and implementation of policy. Dr. Lex, go ahead.
So I've been around medical politics for many years, and there's room for legislation, but I think legislation needs to be like the last resort. Anything that you could do on your own to fix things, to get your community together is better. Because when legislation is written, you never know what's going to come out of it. I mean, you may have a great idea, but at the end of the day, after all the politicians get done with it and all the negotiations, you may end up with completely different legislation than what you started out with. So legislation has to be the last resort. Anything that you could do before that would be better. The one legislation I discussed in my talk is like for tramadol, and that's because there's no other choice. So, I mean, I'd love it to be voluntary to have tramadol on cures. I'd love it for, people to be educated on that, but that's not an option. The only way to get that in the registry is to pass a law to make that a scheduled medication. So, that's the one place. But as far as mandating, physicians to use a pain agreement or mandating all ERs to follow a certain guidelines, I'm opposed to that. I think it's better done when your own individual community comes together and makes it happen. But if we don't, then someone will legislate us and we may not like the option.
Well, there's one thing that, Roneet knows this, is we sit on the San Diego Task Force together, the Sherrie Task Force. I would like to see identification required for Schedule II and above medications, not to help law enforcement with their cases, and so there's a record of who's picking up whose medication. I think it would help tremendously. And that's my personal opinion. But I think an ID should be required for Schedule II and above.
We have, just to follow up on Sherry's thing, in our emergency department guidelines, one of the things it says photo ID we won't make because we don't want to, force, what if I don't have a camera or whatever, but may be required because we've had patients come into the emergency department. This is before I was smarter and I checked cures every time. I used to, before I got to that point, I checked them like after my check, like this was suspicious. And it's like, this guy gave me a completely different name. He doesn't even exist. He says he got all these prescriptions for his doctors and he's not even, something's off. So people don't always say who they are. So that would make sense.
Susan?
I was going to say, just to our district policy, one thing I feel that our district has done well is we have a policy that we do not give over-the-counter oral medication, even down to the acetaminophen, ibuprofen, without a physician's authorization. And we'll have parents call, well, can't you just give my child some Advil? No, we don't. We don't want to, and it opens up an opportunity to educate the parents that we don't want to use this loosely. We don't want your child coming in and like I said, they can stand a little bit of pain. If they're going to be in that much pain, we'll send them home. But we're not going to set the precedence of giving the oral over-the-counter medications without a physician's authorization. And I think that has worked well for our school district.
What can the California Medical Association Alliance do to help support all of your efforts individually? What would you ask of them today? What they could do to enhance what you're doing in the community? And we'll start with Sherrie.
Well, I'd be happy to come out wherever you need to, and I know Erin, in your individual communities, we do travel and we do presentations, so we're available to help educate young adults and parents and your community. So, large donation is great. Just kidding. But basically, yeah, we're available to come out and help you in your education goals as an alliance to make the consequences real.
Susan?
We could use advocates for school nurses to increase the number of school nurses, so we have a lower ratio of nurses to students to nurses. The other thing that would be very important to advocate for is more mental health services, and that would be just a huge benefit and a huge help for us.
Mark?
Well, I think I spoke briefly about educating the medical community, and I think you guys have the ties to that community. And so I think it would be great if there was some type of program for CME or for whatever to educate doctors about this problem. When I spoke to one of the doctors at the break, and he had no idea that prescription drugs were this big of a problem. And so there's been talks about doing a movie similar to Natalie's, just targeted towards doctors and the prescription drug program. So I think that would be where you make a big impact, is making sure that they write what is necessary, what is needed, but not excessively.
Thank you, Mark. Dr. Lem?
Education, I mean, you could start at home, ask your physician husbands, are they using cures, and how many pills are they writing, and can they check on that? There's so many different ideas that could happen in a medical level. I know when I fought the prescription drug use task force and going through the pain guidelines, the community doctors say, you know what, it takes way too long. We have 15-minute patients. How can we go through all these rules of these medicines with the patients? We don't have that. And one of the patients, pain specialist says, you know what, we just have a movie, and it explains all the rules for the patients of these are the guidelines, this is how you take your medications, not to share, not to lose them, don't go to the ER, these are your responsibilities, these are the things that can happen to you. And we have that in the waiting room, so before they even see the doctor, they understand the rules. So, I mean, that's a project that could happen, and I'm sure that would help in physicians' offices, because it's very time consuming to go through all that on a patient visit, and doctors are not afforded that time.
Dylan?
I didn't know you guys were doing that. That's excellent.
We're not doing that.
Oh, okay.
I'd love to do it.
Oh, well, I may be able to help you with that. My suggestion would be to call your county health department. Chances are you have a health educator or a program similar to the one we have, my program, Prescription for Prevention. And they probably need your support. I personally work to educate physicians, all health practitioners, schools, law enforcement. That's my job. And chances are in your counties, there is a health department person, a prevention specialist like myself, who is doing exactly that and really probably needs to have your support behind them. Along with what Dr. Lev mentioned regarding the film, we have developed little PSAs for doctors' offices and emergency departments. A PSA is a commercial, but because it's a public service announcement, generally there's no cost involved and people will put it up just as a public service. And these PSAs literally tell the patient that they shouldn't share their medications, that they should make sure to lock them up, etc. We haven't done any evaluations of those as yet because they're so new. This issue has really come to the forefront since 2005, so we really haven't been doing this for very long. So we haven't had an opportunity to evaluate. But then the third and final thing would be for all of your physician husbands, spouses, to just say one thing in that 3-minute examination about here is your prescription for hydrocodone. By the way, this can be this is a narcotic and it can be addictive. So follow the regime the way I said to, and hope you feel better. See you in 3 days or 2 weeks or whatever. Because we do have the data on that, and just that 10-second blurb of a physician talking to a patient, just that short message can make huge impacts on a macro level. Thank you.
Question for you, Della. Is your position funded by state or federal? Is it state or federal? Do you know? And it's a policy question because it relates to advocacy that we'll talk about tomorrow in terms of what your work is at the county. I think is important.
We are funded by the Tobacco Settlement Fund.
Oh, okay. Okay, so that's good. That answers my question.
Why is everybody gasping?
Well, at least some of that money's going for a good cause.
There you go.
Oh, thank you. some people get a little nervous about that. We are funded through the tobacco settlement funds and through the community anti-drug coalitions. Some of you might be familiar with CADCA. Actually, we filter money to certain cities here in Orange County through that federal grant. And so the cities here in Orange County of Garden Grove, Laguna Beach, Dana Point, I think that's it, are funded to do this kind of work specifically through that grant. But it's very small, and so tobacco settlement is the way.
You know, that was very important because it leads to what I think we'll talk more about tomorrow when I do a presentation on what this group's going to do and what they can do to go advocate for us. So, at this time, I'd like to open it for questions from the audience.